Hey, friends, welcome back to the Big Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 503. This week, it is my honor to introduce you to Matt Drayton. Sergeant Major Matthew R. Drayton was born in Savannah, Georgia, in an underprivileged neighborhood. Matt joined the military to leave his environment and become financially independent. Little did he know at the time that enlisting would lead into a successful military career spanning almost 3 decades. Matt is a decorated combat veteran who has led and mentored hundreds of men and women. He's also a corporate speaker, consultant, and leadership expert with experience in government and commercial commerce. Matt knows what it takes to overcome adversity to become successful and how to lead and motivate others to maximize their potential. All right, everybody, let's drop in with Matt. Let's do this. Matt, I am so excited to have you on the Big Talk podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Tricia. I'm glad to be here and glad to talk with you today.
I am so glad to. And before we were rolling, we were just talking about our pets and how amazing they are. We've got Lola over here on her little perch, and I know you have a little pup downstairs.
Yep, I've got a Shih Tzu named Gizmo downstairs. He kind of looks like a gremlin, so that's why we named him that.
I remember Gizmo from that movie.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully Gizmo will stay busy during our time together because we have a lot to cover.
Okay, he's got tons of toys down there. I think he'll be fine.
Amazing. Well, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today for many, many reasons. And one of the other reasons is what you shared just a second ago, which was how much you love and are devoted to being of service. Can you take us back, as far back as you want to go, Matt, where this all began for you and what has led you to this moment in time with me today?
Yes, so I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I'm an only child. I lost my mother at a very early age. I was 7 years old when she died. So that left me and my father, just us two, uh, and for him to raise me. My father struggled with some substance abuse problems and other things. He was not formally educated. So we kind of depended on each other. One of the things my mother taught me to read before she died, so I could read at a high level at 6 or 7 years old. So I would read things and help my father out. And but it was really tough because we weren't well resourced, and I kind of saw early on that I would have to leave Savannah to do anything, to have any kind of success. So the military kind of became an avenue for me to do that. Now, part of that as well, becoming a teenager, you hear the term that you can only have one man of the house and one woman of the house. So me and my father started to butt heads a little bit when I became a teenager. And so my thought was, hey, okay, I'll fix him. I'll go in the army, I'll show him. And that's kind of what wound up happening. I didn't have a plan when I went in the military. Matter of fact, I was on a jog. I went by the recruiting station, and next thing you knew, I was signed up to go. Matter of fact, my father even tried to get me out of it, but I wound up going in, and that is what pretty much changed my life because I learned discipline. I traveled. I went overseas. I learned the importance of working with other people. It just taught me so much. And so I wound up doing 26 years in the military. I met my wife. I had my family. And then I wound up doing a few years as a Department of Defense civilian as well. And that's what kind of got me in the speaking business. Just understanding that how powerful sometimes words can be, but more importantly, how powerful your experiences can be in helping other people. So that's kind of what led me to this interview with you today.
I'm so excited because you're talking about the power of words. When was it that you found your voice and how you came to know that by speaking and sharing your story, you could have impact?
So when I have always been pretty vocal. I've always been pretty outgoing. I don't know where that came from, but even as a kid, I would be told on occasion, "Hey, pipe down," So I've always been pretty vocal. So that was never an issue, and I've always been pretty good at expressing myself. But I would have to say I found my voice in the military because as you know, the military is a structured system by rank, so you have to work your way through. And as I started to move up the ladder in rank as a non-commissioned officer, I was pretty much forced to lead. I mean, you'll either lead, they had a saying, either lead or get out of the way, and
Mm.
so I was pretty much forced to do that. And I would do a lot of speaking in front of groups, a lot of speaking to the people that work for me, a lot of speaking to the people that were above me. And what I kind of found out happening was how I handled and dealt with people and how I talked to them and interacted with them had a major impact on their performance. And and that can be both ways. Now, I didn't always have best bedside manner in the world. I've been working on that and still working on that to this day. But I learned that, hey, there's a way to talk to people, there's a way to get people to do things, and a lot of times how you address them and how you respect them and treat them with dignity has a lot to do with that. So I would say, so around 2005 is when I started my speaking business, but I would say I found my voice in the military, coming through the ranks.
Thank you for your service. Again, 26 years. That's incredible.
Thank you.
I want to ask you a question. It's a little off topic, but I think it's worth asking. We're recording this podcast in October, and the Russian military is drafting their young people. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that is very interesting. I'm glad you asked me that because I do have some thoughts on it. So one of the things about the U.S. military, it is voluntary. Okay, so and what we're seeing in Russia right now, and what we're seeing in the Ukraine is when you are not devoted to your cause, and when you don't believe in what you're doing, you fail. And that's what's happening to the Russian military. They were basically misled into this conflict that they're in by their leader. And so now they're struggling mightily with a force half their size. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said, I would take a company of Army Rangers over probably a whole battalion of those Russian soldiers, because that company of Army Rangers, they believe in what they're doing, they're committed to it, and they will fight to the death because they believe in what they're doing. So, and the whole thing with the draft. So you see all these Russian men that they're leaving the country because they don't believe in it. They don't believe that they're fighting for their country. They don't believe that they're fighting for their freedom. And that's where we are there. So that's my thoughts on that. I think that's one of the things that separates the United States military from all others is the fact that most of us volunteer, most of us take an oath, and most of us, I would say 99%, believe in it. And so when we go out to combat and when we go out to do our missions, we are committed and dedicated to those missions.
I love that you shared this with us today, Matt. It's so beautiful, and it's directly related to leadership as a cause. And when you think about you being a leader and the books that you've written and what you believe in, talk about that a little bit in relationship to the difference between following a leader who's misleading you and following a leader like you who's in integrity and who has a mission.
Yeah. So one of the things I think that is vital for any leader is just to be authentic, to be yourself, and to be human. Sometimes, I'm guilty of this in the past. We as leaders, we try to be perfect, and we try to put on this air that we can't make a mistake and we can't go back on something that we said. And I think that is where a lot of times we get into trouble. Being authentic, uh, showing compassion, and showing people that you care about them, uh, being grateful, thanking people for what they do for you. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about just the two words "thank you," and then not just me directly to you, Tricia, but do it publicly, thanking people publicly, giving them, and just how far that can go with just people willing to work for you. One one of the things I always thought about is you can have a team of 20 people, and then you should, as a leader, you should ask yourself a question: if there is a big time a problem that I'm getting ready to face, will one of those people come tell me?
Hmm.
And I think that is directly related to how you treat them. And so it's very important to treat people the right way. And then one of the things that I've always kind of laid back on, and I say this often in interviews that I do, a leader should always be able to get a good night's sleep. And basically, what that means is you have tried your best to do the very best you can. So at night, you're not laying up wondering and thinking about something you did wrong or something you didn't address when you should have.
That's so beautiful. I love that. My husband always says, "Thank yous are free. Give them abundantly."
That is a good saying. I love it. I might steal
What
it.
I You can absolutely steal it. I always tell my speakers, if I say something on a coaching call, steal it because it's yours. I want you to have it. I
Nice.
also want to highlight that you said thanking people publicly.
Yeah.
There's so much value in that because when you do that, the person you're thanking feels seen.
Right.
And that's such an important part of what we do as leaders is to make people feel seen and heard so that they can, like you said, come to you when there's a problem.
Right. And I totally agree. And the other thing too, one of the things that I've tried to do throughout my career is, and one of the things about the military, you work with a lot of people. So I've worked with hundreds of people over my career, and I'm always excited when I see somebody that I haven't seen in a long time, and they're coming towards you, vice going the other way. And that is because if people are going the other way, then there was there is something that you did or something about you that they don't want to engage with you. But fortunately, I'll knock on wood that most of the people that I run into, they're glad to see me. They want to talk. They want to catch up, and that kind of reassures me that I did something right down the road back in the day when I worked with these people.
That's amazing. How does it feel to not be in the military after having been in the military for so long? What does that mean to you to be a civilian?
Yeah. So one of the things that I have found, Tricia, is that, and when I retired from the military, I did it voluntarily. I realized that it was a young man's game. My body started to kind of break down a little bit. I was on jump status out here, so I jumped out of planes at Fort Bragg here in North Carolina, and so I did. So the military is very physical, even and your retirement age for the military is usually late 30s, mid 40s. So
Just like a dancer.
by that time you've put a lot of wear and tear on your body, and so I realized that hey, it's time for me probably to step down. So I think it's different for you when you choose and you're kind of calling the shots. Now I've had some friends who kind of stuck around and were kind of told, or they ran out of time and they really weren't ready to go. And I think they handle retirement different. But I didn't have a hard time adjusting. I took a few months off and then I went back to work for a contracting company. Then I had to work for the government. Uh, and then, of course, the good thing is one of the things about being staying here near where I was stationed is I still run into a lot of the people that I knew in the military.
And is it a tight community?
It's very tight. I've got a good friend of mine that we served many, many years together. We go work out twice a week. We go to the base and do work out at the gym, if you want to call it working out. But we're in there, but the relationships you establish in the military a lot of times last for a lifetime. And with all the social media now, we can keep up with each other. I've got friends that I see on Instagram. One of my buddies, he's out in Wyoming getting ready to retire. He's got a ranch out there, and others are traveling around the country doing speaking engagements and things like that. So it's just a good community, something that I'm glad I was a part of.
That's amazing. I would love to move into talking about your latest book, Leading While Black: Leadership Strategies and Lessons for Today's Black Professional.
Yes. So leading while black, my inspiration for writing the book was basically a guide, kind of a strategy and lesson guide to help young black leaders. One of the things, so the title I've had many book people tell me, hey, you're cutting off like half of your audience when you say, while black, all leaders need lessons, and that's true. And I will say that a lot of the lessons, if you read my book, they apply to any leader. But as a black man, as a black leader, I faced a lot of challenges that a lot of my white counterparts did not. And so, what I tried to do with this book was address some of those challenges, address some of the situations that they may find themselves in, and provide solutions or suggestions to better navigate through those. One of the things, and then we talked about this earlier before we got on. I don't write books for money, so I didn't really care about the reception it got. But I am cognizant, however, of just trying to be professional and not offensive and things of that nature. And and I'll just share this with you. I had a couple people who didn't even read the book, just thought it was because of the title, thought it was something kind of radical or militant or something to that nature. And it is absolutely nothing to do with that. It's just totally about leadership lessons and strategies for young black professionals. But I'm proud of it. I've gotten some good feedback from it, and I engage regularly with a lot of young leaders on just how to deal with situations and navigate through situations.
Well, as you know, Matt, when you put yourself out there, you're going to get criticism whether you ask for it or not, and you're going to
Right.
get feedback whether you ask for it or not.
Right.
I would love for you to break down some of these strategies and lessons for us today.
Okay. So one of the things, but let me just talk about feedback for a minute. So one of the things I will say with feedback is all feedback is good feedback. Sometimes we only want to hear the feedback we want to hear, but if a person sends me something and it's not something I want to hear, I have to look at it and say, okay, this is how they see it. This is their view. And,
Yeah.
and I respect that. And I usually respond in kind. And so I just wanted to touch on that.
Thank you. I'll
So,
also interject that I keep talking about my husband Joe today.
yep,
He and I sing around the house. Can I offer you some feedback in the voice of Maya Rudolph? If you've not seen that movie, it's hilarious.
I have not. What was it again?
It's called Wine Country, and she always asks her friends if she can offer some feedback, but she sings it. It's hilarious.
So Wine Country. Is that new? Because
No, it's a few years old. It's a
okay,
very funny movie. Maya Rudolph. It's the SNL cast, basically.
okay, okay. So you want to talk about a few lessons that I've learned.
Yeah,
Um,
some of your
so
strategies in the book.
yep. So a couple things. One of the things that I really harp on, and I still, I've been married a long time, and I still struggle with this, but it's just listening. You know, sometimes, sometimes when you're in a senior position or you have done something for a very long time and you become pretty good at it, you have a tendency sometimes to shut down people who are younger and who are looking at the problem from a different angle. Um, Sometimes, and so listening is vital, especially when you're sitting far away from the problem. The people who work an issue every day, they have solutions a lot of times for things that you're dealing with because they're doing it every single day. If you're sitting upstairs, you might want to just listen to them. And so that's one of the things. Just listening to your team members, uh, giving them some value. Just listening to them, providing value for them, and then the other thing with that, anytime you're showing that type of respect to someone, that is what in turn they will do when they become leaders. So everything you're doing is kind of you're teaching people. I had a young man that worked for me years ago when I was young. I was in my early mid 20s. So this guy comes in and he was like 3 years older than me, and just cut to the chase. So after talking to him for a while, I noticed he was just very smart. Always had practical solutions. Well, his father was a wealthy gentleman up in the northern part of the country, New Hampshire or Rhode Island somewhere, and he sent his son in the military to learn leadership lessons, basically to just get some. But this kid, when I tell you he was so smart, he was intimidating. And initially, I was just pushing back on him because he would ask me all these questions. But then I realized, hey, this kid's an asset. He's very smart. So I started going to him for stuff. And sometimes that's what you got to be able to do too, as well. We don't have all the answers. And then that brings to me another important point. Know who's on your team. Know who's there, because I took the time that his name was Keith. I asked Keith some questions, and then that's how I found out all this stuff about him. I would, if otherwise, I would not have known if I had just kind of stayed in my area, and just because he was I think he was a private first class, and I was a staff sergeant, so I was an E6 in the Army. So I mean, he had there was layers between me and him, and I could, if I just dealt with his boss, then I would never talk to this young man. So that's one of them. The other one is I talk about conflict resolution. So the thing with conflict, for leaders, ag- acknowledge a conflict and recognize it immediately. And then run towards it. A lot of leaders. My last job as a DoD civilian, we had a big problem because there were some issues arising, and when it was taken to the senior leader, he pushed it back. He didn't want anything to do with it, and we just wound up with a way bigger mess than we should have ever had. It had been addressed internally first, and then taken to the command like it was supposed to. That never happened. So we wound up with a major scandal, major problem that impacted many people when it should have been dealt with, and been a small issue. So when conflict arises, address it and deal with it immediately. Conflict does not go away if you ignore it. And the sooner you address it, be it with team members, or be it with a work problem or equipment, whatever the issue may be, you need to let someone know. That was one of the things that happened in the Iraq War. With Saddam Hussein, his military leaders could not go to him and tell him things were broke, because if they did, he would shoot them. So what wound up happening? He's he's saying, "Hey, how's all the tanks?" They're like, "Yeah, everything's good," because nobody wants to get shot. Well, they were in total disarray. I mean, that's why we were able to just route them the way we were. And then the same thing with leadership. No one believed in the cause. So those men, you saw them giving up, just waving the white flag. I mean, just like, and 20 minutes into the war, they were giving up. So that's those are a couple of things. Is that do you need any more, or
I'm going to list these again for our listeners. They're so, so good. Listen, model,
yep,
know who's
listening,
on your team.
yep, listening, addressing conflict, and then one more I'll give you is just as a last one. So contingency planning. Okay, so a lot of times when we start to go down a road to do something, we don't look at what the second and third order effects can be. And I think that now the military prepares you for that. So if the military plans a mission, then the first thing they do is start coming up with contingencies. So if this happens, we need to flex and do this. But I think that works really well in business. I think it works really well in your personal life as well, because things don't always go perfect. I mean, yeah, we can plan. We can say, we're going to fly out to Los Angeles this week. But okay, so then what if we get stuck in Chicago? God knows if you go through O'Hare, you're going to get stuck. I mean, it's a fact. So then what? Do we have enough resources to maybe stay a couple of nights? Do we have enough clothing? Do we have the things we need? Extra phone batteries. These type things. And I simplified that, but then you can imagine on a military mission, it would be much bigger. You would say, okay, do I have enough men? Do I have enough equipment? Things of that nature. So I think contingency planning is very important. I think that is something that when you plan anything, especially business type things, you have more than one course of action to follow in case of some emergency.
Amazing. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what you shared at the top of this conversation about the book and how important the book is to discuss the difference that you as a Black leader had from your white counterparts. And what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll just share. I'll share a couple of examples. So there's about a year ago, a little more. There was a 60 minutes piece with Lloyd Austin, who is the Secretary of Defense. And I think this is probably the best example I could give you. So Lloyd Austin did a 60 minutes interview, and he talked to the interviewer about his experiences coming through the military ranks as an officer. And when he was in the 82nd Airborne Division as a operations officer, he would let a white officer brief the platoon or the battalion because the men were more susceptible to listen to that white officer. That's so that mean that is pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. The other thing he talked about was going overseas and him being the leader of the party, but the foreign guests that were greeting him went to greet a white officer because they thought he was in charge. And so these are some of the things that we deal with in society as a whole. I mean, I'm fine with all this stuff. I had a lot of opportunities, and I'm not complaining at all. What I am doing is highlighting that if you're going to be a black leader, it's going to be different. I personally witnessed where black officers, when they took charge, when they were put in leadership positions, the senior leaders changed the organizational chart so that that black officer wouldn't be in charge of certain people. I mean, I witnessed this. So, these things happen. I mean, this is what you have to deal with. And one of the reasons for writing the book was, hey, to be prepared for this. This is
Right.
and look, and you should embrace a leadership position. I talk about that in the book. If you want to be a leader and a leadership position presents itself, you should jump on it. You should embrace it because when if you are successful and if you go in and give it 100%, you're going to be an inspiration for some other young black future leader. And that's what everybody has to understand. You're paving the way for someone else. So that's kind of the difference in experiences that you have. I would travel all over the country planning military operations and all over the world for that matter. And I'll tell you, there were times when I showed up, man, I could tell that the people did not know that I was an African American. They didn't know I was a black man. Uh, some of those people I had to win over. I've had people refuse to shake my hand when I showed up. These are all the things that you may have to deal with. And that has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with the insecurities and the problems those other people have. That's the other thing you have to always remember. And so that kind of now, and look, I'm wired a little different because that type of impact, that type of experience can really harm and damage some people. But I always took these things as a challenge.
Right. Right. So reframing discrimination into an experience where you could take it as a challenge.
Correct.
That's so powerful. I'm
Yes.
really, really glad that you're giving this, giving us an opportunity to hear from you inside of this book. We'll put the book in the show notes as well so everybody can get it. I think that pointing out that young men and women should always embrace stepping into a leadership role is so important because so many people are afraid they're not capable of being leaders. And it sounds like you know that everyone can be if you just learn how.
That is correct. And the thing is, the thing about it, you know, with leadership, if you go into it for the right reasons, I always and in the military, a lot of times you're kind of thrust into it. But when you have that position, when you have that authority, if you make it about the people that, excuse me, are on your team, if you make it about making their lives and their jobs better, your job will be easier. If you make it about trying to hold on to your power, and if you make it about how you look to your higher ups, then you're going to struggle. And I've seen it all. I've had some of the best, and that's one of the things about my military career. I've had the opportunity to really, really work with some really, really special people, some smart individuals, some highly capable individuals. A lot of them now who are retired general officers, and some who are retired command sergeant majors who did really, really well, not only in the military, but outside. and that exposure helped me a lot. But yes, absolutely, you embrace the leadership role. You make it about the people that you're leading because that is what it's all about. You're not there to haze people and treat them bad, and you have to understand that the power you have over people when you impact their livelihoods, their jobs, and things of that nature. So, absolutely.
Matt, you are truly an influential voice. It's such a privilege to have you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Are you ready for some fast talk?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What's your favorite book?
So, my favorite book, believe it or not, is a book by Spencer Johnson called "Who Moved My Cheese." Are you familiar with it?
No, I love that.
So listen, so "Who Moved My Cheese" is a book. I think it's like 100 pages, maybe. It's just but it's by Dr. Spencer Johnson, and it's about change.
Hmm.
And the cheese is change, and there's a few mice in this book. I won't give the whole thing away for your listeners who have. And basically, the cheese moves, and you get used to the cheese being in one place, and then it's gone. And so, and that's to sum it up in a nutshell. But it kind of goes through some stages there. But it's one of my favorite books. And when I saw that question, I thought about all the books that I've got a ton of them. I've got fiction and nonfiction. I just read a book called "The Sweetness of Water" by Nathan Harris. It's a fiction book about post Civil War. Great book. But anyway, but as far as just impact, because when I read "Who Moved My Cheese" many years ago, it totally changed my perception about change and
Hmm.
how change impacts organizations and how change impacts our personal lives. And one of the things that during my careers, multiple careers, that I've seen the biggest struggle, especially in the government, is change. People don't like it. And, we change out software, we change out computers, we change out systems. And one of the things about the military, every 2 years, you get a new commander, there's going to be a lot of change. And everybody knows this, but still everybody's reluctant to do it. So that's my favorite book. I'd have to say "Who Moved My Cheese" by Spencer Johnson. If you haven't read it, it's a quick read, but I think it'll really impact you in a positive way if you read that book.
I will look forward to reading it. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Who's your favorite speaker, Matt, and why?
So my favorite speaker is a gentleman who's no longer with us. His name is Keith Harrell. Are you familiar with him?
No.
So Keith Harrell was a basketball player, big tall guy, like 6'8", but he became a motivational speaker, and he was extremely funny. He was very engaging, and he's just one of those speakers that you can sit and listen to for hours.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And and,
I
and there's
do.
not many like that. I'm also a big fan of Stephen Covey, even though and
Mm.
he again is no longer with. It's like all the good guys are leaving us, but Stephen Covey, he's another one that I have kind of modeled. I learned something from him about doing his. I went to a seminar on his 7 habits,
Hmm.
and they talked about the circle of influence and the circle of concern. And that circle of influence, that's another thing that I stole and I use. I talk to people all the time about, because we spend so much time worrying about the things we're concerned about, and we don't focus enough on the things that we can actually influence, which is mostly our own behavior and how we deal with things. So so those would be, but Keith Harrell would be number one, and then I'd put Stephen Covey number two. I know you asked for one, so
That's all right. You can do two.
okay.
How do you memorize, Matt, when you're speaking?
So I use stories. I found that using stories that relate to whatever the group I'm talking to really helps. I did a speech a couple years ago, about a year ago, with some young people down in Florida, and I talked about some of the challenges I had raising my kids. These are kids that were heading off to college, and I wanted to share with them some of my experiences and some of the things I saw on the campus when I dropped my kids off there. And so stories is one of the things I use. I use cue cards to kind of keep me on track, and then the most important thing is a stopwatch to make sure I don't waste other people's time.
So
Uh, but,
true.
but those keep me on track.
Love it. What do
Yep.
you do the day before you speak?
So the day before I speak, usually I have a checklist that I use. That's a military thing, but it's a good thing. So I have a list of things, everything from, hey, here's what I'm taking with me, here's what I need audio visual wise or prop wise. If I need books to take with me, um, I um, I prepare. I rehearse the speech until I'm very, very extremely comfortable with it. And then the other thing, one of the things a lot of people don't understand about speaking, and I know you understand this. So I have spent as much as 80 hours on a 20-minute keynote
Oh,
because
yeah.
you get to picking at it and you get to seeing things and you get to practicing it. And people don't see that. And then you see a speaker get up there and he goes through a 20-minute speech and boom, he's hitting on, he's getting all these feedback and these payoffs and everything. And a lot of that is like 80 hours of work in the background just for those 20 minutes. But if I had to say, just use one word, I would, for any speaker or aspiring speaker, it would be to over prepare.
Love that.
Over prepare and have contingencies. Don't rely on audio visual. Be able to go like a caveman with no props if you had to, because if equipment will break, it will break during your keynote. Or that thing I did in Florida a year ago. I had this funny video I wanted to play with it was one of those commercials where the lady, where you think somebody said something, they cut it out, so you hear something you thought it was bad and it wasn't, and it never worked, didn't work. So, but I had to keep moving.
Yes, you did.
Over
Love that.
prepare is what I would throw out there.
Perfect. And finally, what podcast are you currently obsessed with, Matt?
So I'm not. I wouldn't say obsessed, but I tell you two that I really like. So Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am.
That's pretty good. I like the way he communicates. I like he has a very calming manner about him,
Yeah.
and so I listen to his podcast. And then the other one is Adam Mendler. Uh, it's 30-minute mentors. I had an opportunity to do an interview for Adam Mendler earlier in the year, a written interview, and so that was good. But those are two that I really like. And but Andy Stanley, I like his delivery, his methods, and his message is always on point and accurate, appropriate for leadership, for leaders, aspiring leaders.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt, for being a featured guest today on the Big Talk. It was such an honor to have this conversation with you.
Well, Tricia, I really enjoyed being here. The time really flew. It didn't even seem like we were only here a couple minutes.
I know. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
So you can find me online. My website is mattdrayton.com. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, and Drayton Communications LLC Live, and I'm also on Instagram, Drayton Communications, Matt Drayton Live LLC. So my books are on my website, and if you reach out to me, I'm very good at responding to people and answering questions and doing things like that, because I think that's what this is all about, is helping people and being able to share all of the lessons that I learned over the years, and help people just like the people who helped me come through the ranks helped me.
Amazing. And we will put all of those links on the show notes so that everybody can get in touch with you and get your books and follow you on all of the socials. If you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get access to all the latest episodes. And if you are listening, if this is your version of choice, thank you so much for dropping in with us today. We appreciate your time. And remember, your voice matters. Hit me up on Instagram if you want to share feedback. And sending you so much big love, everybody.